Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavataseva Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtake. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Satsvarup Das Goswami, Volume 2, Planting the Seed, New York City, 1965 to 66, Chapter 17 on the Bowery. So different followers or enthusiasts are coming to see Prabhupada. Sometimes they're doing kirtan, lectures, and Prabhupada is also taking cooking classes. So lots of things are happening. So consciousness, so that somehow the topic of consciousness came up. Consciousness is a popular word in America. There is consciousness expansion, cosmic consciousness, altered states of consciousness, and now dovetailing the individual consciousness with the supreme consciousness. This is the perfection of consciousness. Prabhupada explains, this is the love and peace that everyone is really after. And yet Prabhupada talks of it in terms of war. They are talking on the battlefield, and Arjun says, I'll not fight. I'll not fight with my relatives and brothers for the sake of achieving some kingdom. No, no. Now to the ordinary man it appears that, oh, Arjun is a very nice man, non-violent. He has given up everything for the sake of his relatives. Oh, what a nice man he is. That is the ordinary calculation. But what does Krishna say? He says, you are damned fool number one. Now just see. The things which are estimated in the public eye as very nice, very good, that is here condemned by God. So you have to see whether the Supreme Consciousness is pleased with your actions. And Arjun's action was not approved by Lord Krishna. It was for his own whim, sense gratification, that at first sight he would not fight, but in the end for Krishna's satisfaction, he did fight. And that is our perfection, when we act for the satisfaction of the Supreme Consciousness. At this point, some in the audience are filled with reservations. They are all opposed to the role of United States in Vietnam. And this idea is very difficult for them. Like Arjun, they want peace. So why is Swami sanctioning war? He explains. Yes, Arjun's idea not to fight is good, but then Krishna, the Supreme Consciousness, instructs him to fight anyway. Therefore, Arjun's fighting is above mundane ethics. It is absolute. If we follow Arjun, give up good and bad, and act for Krishna, not for our sense gratification, then what is perfect? Because then that is perfect, because Krishna is a supreme consciousness. To some in his audience, although his answer seems philosophically sound, it's not quite what they want to hear. Still, they want to know his political views. Does he support America's involvement in Vietnam? Is he anti-war? But Prabhupada is neither hawk nor dove. He has no political motive behind his example of Krishna and Arjuna. His theme is simple and pure. Beyond the good and the bad is the absolute, and to act in accord with the absolute is also beyond good and bad. But what about Vietnam? Does Krishna say to fight there? No, Swamiji answers. The Vietnam war is different from the Kurukshetra war. In the battle of Kurukshetra, Krishna was personally present, asking Arjun to fight. Vietnam is different. But his audience has yet another objection. If he is not addressing the Vietnamese war, then why not? After all, this is 1966. If he is not talking about the war, then what's his relevancy? Goswami replies that his message is actually the most urgent and relevant. The Vietnamese war was an inevitable karmic reaction. It was one symptom, not the whole problem. And only this philosophy, surrender to the Supreme Consciousness, addresses the real problem. But for many, the reference to fighting is so emotionally charged that they can't go beyond the immediate politics of Vietnam to Prabhupada's real message of surrender to the supreme consciousness. They respect the Swami. They realize he is referring to a deeper philosophy. Yet the story of Arjuna and the war makes things difficult. The Swami nonetheless continues to refer to Arjuna's fighting as a classic example of Bhagavad Gita's basic teaching. It is not the basic teaching his audience is having difficulty with. It's an example. Prabhupada has deliberately handed his audience a volatile analogy. He hasn't come to join the peace movement, and he doesn't accept their short-sighted concept of peace. He confronts them. It's better to fight in Krishna consciousness than to live in a so-called peace devoid of God realization. Yes, the example is hard for them to accept. It makes them think. And if they do accept, then they might come near to understanding the absolute. Is it very difficult, dovetailing our consciousness with the Supreme Consciousness? Not at all, not at all. No sane man will say, oh, it's not possible. He isn't suggesting that to dovetail with the Supreme Consciousness, they will have to go fight in Vietnam or perform some other horrible act on behalf of God. He knows that spiritual life will have to be more attractive than material life, or his audience will never take to it. He wants to bring the theme of dovetailing with the Supreme Consciousness down to something practical, something all attractive and beautiful, something anyone could do and would want to do. He wants to encourage them by saying that they can do their own thing, but for Krishna. Arjuna, after all, was a lifetime warrior. Krishna didn't ask him to give up his work, but do it for the Supreme. So Prabhupada is asking the same of his audience, and they can begin with something as simple as offering their food to God. Because everyone has to eat, so God wants to eat something. Why don't you first offer your food to God? Then you eat. But you may say, but if God takes it away, then how shall I eat? No, God will not take it. Daily after preparing our foodstuffs, we are offering to Krishna. There is a witness Mr. David had seen. Prabhupada. God eats, but his spiritual eating is such that even after his eating, the whole thing is still there. So we shall not suffer a pinch if we dovetail our desires with the Supreme Lord. We simply have to learn the art, how to dovetail. Nothing has to be changed. The fighting man did not change into an artist or musician. If you are a fighting man, you remain a fighting man. If you are a musician, you remain a musician. If you are a medical man, you remain a medical man. Whatever you are, you remain. But dovetail it. If by my eating the Lord is satisfied, then that is my perfection. If by my fighting the Lord is satisfied, then that is my perfection. So in every sphere of life, we have to know whether the Lord is satisfied. That technique we have to learn. Then it is as easy as anything. We have to stop creating our own plans and thoughts and take the perfect plans from the Supreme Lord and execute them. That will become the perfection of our life. So basically, yes, this is the philosophy. To understand, to find out what will satisfy Krishna. And that's what we need to do. That's all. So how do we find out what satisfies Krishna? It cannot be just my thinking that, oh, I think Krishna is satisfied with this. No. That is where Guru comes into the picture. So Prabhupada, through his books, he has explained what satisfies Krishna, what pleases Krishna. So that's what we have to do. Simple. See, some instructions are general instructions that apply to everybody. Chanting of a round, following the four principles, that satisfies, because this is what Prabhupada has given us. And then further, if there are some more instructions, we'll find out and then do that. And Lord Chaitanya has made acting on the platform of consciousness very easy. Just as there are some note makers of school books, easy studies, so Lord Chaitanya has recommended that if you be engaged in whatever occupation, but just hear about Krishna, continue to hear the Bhagavad Gita and chant Hare Krishna. It is for this that we are trying to organize this institution. So you have come, and whatever work you do, it doesn't matter. Everything will be adjusted by and by. As our mind becomes clear simply by hearing. If you continue this process, chanting the Krishna name, you will practically see how much your heart is becoming clear and how much you're making progress towards spiritual realization. The real identity of pure Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada is speaking on behalf of the Supreme Consciousness, and he offers his day-to-day activities as an example of dovetailing with the Supreme. I'm here always working at something, reading or writing, something, reading or writing, 24 hours. Simply when I feel hungry, I take some food, and simply when I feel sleepy, I go to bed. Otherwise, I don't feel fatigued. You can ask Mr. David whether I'm not doing this. Of course, the Swami's daily routine doesn't require certification from David Allen, and any of his regular visitors can see that he is transcendental. His personal life is a perfect example of dovetailing with the Supreme Consciousness. Prabhupada has always kept himself dovetailed with the Supreme. He had been perfectly dovetailed in Vrindavan also, and had no personal need or motive to come to America and live on the Bowery. It was for others' sake that he came to the Bowery, and it is for others' benefit that he is speaking tonight. His spiritual master and Lord Krishna want the conditioned souls to come out of the illusion before it is too late. Speaking vigorously, even until he becomes physically exhausted, sometimes shouting, sometimes pleading, sometimes laughing, he gives his audience as much as he feels they can take. As an emissary of Krishna in the disciplic succession, he can boldly shout that everyone should dovetail with the Supreme. He can speak as strongly as he likes, for as long as they're willing to listen. He's a sadhu. The Sanskrit word means saint and one who cuts. And he repeats the same message that for thousands of years, sadhus of the original Vedic culture have spoken. He is reviving the eternal spirit of the Vedic wisdom to cut the knots of ignorance and illusion. So, this is real sadhu. Sadhu means one who cuts our attachment, the knots of ignorance and illusion. He cuts. How does he cut? He cuts by his words. So everything is illusion from the beginning of our birth, and that illusion is so strong that it's very difficult to get out of. The whole thing is illusion. Birth is illusion, the body is illusion, the bodily relationship and the country are illusion. The father is illusion, the mother is illusion, the wife is illusion, the children are illusion, everything is illusion. And we are contacting that illusion, thinking we are very learned, advanced. We are imagining so many things, but as soon as death comes, the actual fact that then we forget everything. We forget our country, we forget our relatives, we forget our wife, children, father, mother, everything is gone. So that is why it's illusion, it's temporary. My grand, I went up to him afterward. I had the same feeling I had on other occasions when I had been to hear famous people in concerts. I was always interested in going by after concerts to see musicians and singers, just to meet them and see what they're like. I had a similar feeling after Swamiji spoke, so I went up and started talking. But the experience was different from the others in that he wasn't in a hurry. He could talk to me, whereas with others, all you could do was get in a few words. They were always more interested in something else. But he was a person who was actually showing some interest in me as a person. And I was so overwhelmed that I ran out of things to say very quickly. I was surprised. Our meeting broke off on the basis of my not having anything further to say. It was just the opposite of so many other experiences. where some performer would be hurrying off to do something else. This time I was the one who couldn't continue. Prabhupada liked to take walks. From his doorstep at 94 Bowery, he would see directly across the street at Fulton Hotel, a 5-story flop house. Surrounding him were other lower Manhattan lodging houses, whose tenants wandered the sidewalks from early morning till dark. An occasional flock of pigeons would stir and fly from one rooftop to the next or descend to the street. Traffic was heavy. The Bowery was part of a truck route to and from Brooklyn by way of the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges. The Bowery sloped gently downhill towards the north, and Prabhupada could see signboards, a few scraggly Manhattan trees, and the street lights and traffic signals as far up as 4th Street. He could see Con Edison with its prominent clock tower, and if there were no clouds, the top of Empire State Building on the 34th Street. He would walk alone in the morning through the Bowery neighborhood. The month of May that year saw more frequent rains than was normal. And Prabhupada carried an umbrella. Sometimes he walked in the rain. He was not always alone. Sometimes he walked with one of his new friends and talked. Sometimes he shopped. Bitter melon, dal, hing, chickpea flour, and other specialty foods common in Indian vegetarian cuisine were available in Chinatown's nearby markets. On leaving the loft, he would walk south a few steps to the corner of Bowery and Hester Street. Turning right on Hester, he would immediately be in Chinatown, where the shops, markets, and even the Manhattan Savings Bank were identified by signs lettered in Chinese. Sometimes he would walk one block further south to Canal Street, where there's Central Asian Food Market and many other street-side fruit and vegetable markets. In the early morning, the sidewalks were almost deserted, but as the workshops began to open for business, the streets became crowded with local workers, shopkeepers, tourists, and aimless derelicts. The winding side streets of Chinatown were lined with hundreds of small stores, and parked cars lined both sides of the street. So he would go on morning walk and sometimes buy all the Indian stuff that he needed. His walks on Hester would sometimes take him into Little Italy, which overlaps Chinatown and Mulberry Street. In this neighborhood, places like Chinese pork products and the Mi supermarket stood alongside Umberto Clam House and the Puglia restaurant, advertising cappuccino alla Puglia, coffee from Puglia. I guess it's a place in Italy where coffee is famous. His walks west of Bowery into Chinatown and Little Italy were mainly for shopping, but he also noted prospective sites for a temple. Chatham Square on Chatham Square particularly drew his attention, or Chatham Tower on Chatham Square. Sometimes he would walk in the opposite direction as far as the East River and Brooklyn Bridge. But when a friend warned him that a sniper had been firing at strollers along the river, he stopped going there. So sometimes sniper means they can shoot from a long distance away. They could hide somewhere and shoot. They have these guns. Generally, they are trained in army, but once they're out of army and they're disgruntled, and this is what they do. Despite the bad neighborhood where Prabhupada lived and walked, he was rarely disturbed. Often he would find several Bowery bums asleep or unconscious at his door, and he would have to step over them. Sometimes a drunk, simply out of his inability to maneuver, would bump into him, or a derelict would mutter something unintelligible or laugh at him. The more sober ones would stand and gesture courteously, ushering the Swami into or out of his door at 94 Bowery. He would pass among them, acknowledging their good manners as he cleared his path. Certainly few of the Bowery men and others who saw him on his walks knew much about the small elderly Indian sadhu, dressed in saffron and carrying an umbrella and a brown grocery sack. Sometimes Prabhupada would meet one of his new friends on the street. Jan, Michael Grant's girlfriend, met him on several occasions as he was out walking. Jan. I would see him in the midst of this potpourri of people down there, walking down the street. He always had an umbrella and he would always have such a serene look on his face. He would just be taking his afternoon jaunts, walking along, sometimes stepping over the drunks, and I would always get sort of nervous when I would meet him on the sidewalk. He would say, "Are you chanting?" And I would say, "Sometimes." And then he would say, "Oh, that's a good girl." Sitting cross-legged, his back to the shelf visits, assortments of potted plants, a whitish chadar wrapped in white, loose folds across his body. Prabhupada looked grave, almost sorrowful. The picture and an accompanying article appeared in a June issue of the Village Voice. The article read, "The meeting of the mystical West and practical East comes alive in the curious contrast between A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami and its American disciples. The Swami, a cultivated man of 70 with a distinguished education, is here for a year to preach his gospel of peace, goodwill, nearness to God, and more practical, to raise money for his American church. Like his teachings, the Swami is sensible and direct. His main teaching is that mankind may come closer to God by reciting his holy names. That despite the fact that the Swami came to America to seek out the root of godless materialism, a disease, he said, that has already enveloped India, he's a realistic man. If there is any place on earth with money to build a temple, it is here. The Swami wishes to found in America an international society for Krishna consciousness, which will be open for everyone, including women. So he had plans, lots of plans, and slowly, they're manifesting. So we'll stop here. See anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, you all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.